I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands on which we gather today. For here in the shrine room, that's the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. And I'd like to pay my respects to elders past and present and thank them for their ongoing custodianship of this country and its waters. And extend that respect to all the countries that you're coming from online today as well. As Jinavadra mentioned, I've been coming here for only a couple of years and I've barely scratched the surface as far as the levels of Dharma practice goes. So please take my talk today in that context. If it raises questions, we will be breaking off in discussion groups afterwards, and you will be with someone that has a lot more experience than me. So yeah, please do carry any questions forward. My talk this morning is something that has been maybe a year in brewing, although I had no idea it would end up taking the shape of a talk. Here we are. I'd like to thank you for being here and for the Saturday organisers for having me. This is a very difficult subject for me. I sincerely hope it will be useful for everyone here, whatever your gender identity is. I want to start with time. The span of the time of our species. Let's call it 100,000 years plus change. For 90,000 of those, we lived in nomadic family tribes. And we don't have many records of that. But in the last 10,000, which started with the first agrarian revolution, which started off with developing crop planting and animal husbandry. And from that point, two very significant things happened. One, we started to specialise, and two, men took over. And I need to acknowledge that up the top today. That dominance has included possession, sexual servitude, optionless living, violence, control, and exclusion for women. I acknowledge that this is still a lived experience in the world today. And although we may have made some great strides in the last 100 years, we've got a really long way to go. Let's not lose sight of that. Okay, take a breath. Touch the ground. Let me start with a day in my life and how I got to today. I wake up in the morning, have a morning coffee, have my morning meditation, and listen to Radio National on the radio before I go to work. It's usually Patricia Carvelis on RN in the morning. Love ABC. This morning there's a couple of issues of women's topics on the radio, like there often is. Sometimes there's maybe one that deals with bloke stuff. I go to work. And this day is one in the cycle where we have a grant assessment meeting. My job in this meeting is to take notes and provide facts if required. Quite explicitly, my job is not to have an opinion in the room. I'm often the only man in the room, and when I'm not, I'm always in a minority. This day, like a few others, the decision about who gets grants goes through, and like a few other days like it, not a single man has received funding. And no one even mentions it. I'm sitting there puzzled. I'm used to the majority going to women, but 100%, I don't dare say a word for being cast as a white man baby. But I feel a sense of outrage rising in myself. How could they let this happen and not even notice? Hang on. Is this what it's felt like to be a woman since we lived in caves? I think further about it. Who would I even bring this to? It's 80% women in this workforce. I'm not sure I would find a sympathetic ear anywhere. The only real male authority is the CEO. Of course, we've still got a bloke CEO. But I'm not going there. But I do start paying a bit more attention. The list of award winners comes out. 10 out of 10 are women. International residencies, all of them are women. Marker after marker, absolutely dominated by women. I start to pay a bit more attention. Is anyone talking about this in my wider sphere? And broader than that, where I'm working, the language, topics, research, funding, radio seems to be dominated by women. And anyone that raises a question about it seems to cop it. The prevalent gendered dialogue I'm receiving is loaded with concepts of toxic masculinity, patriarchy, male fragility, the male gaze, entitlement, mansplaining, manspreading, microaggressions and white knighting. How can I be with all of this? And who's engaging with it? Maybe I should have a look on the internet. Now, I come across the men going their own way movement, blokes who just cut women out of their lives entirely. I come across incels and their hero who killed 6 women. I come across men's rights activists, male feminists, masculinists, and none of this is nourishing the type of conversation, open-hearted and honest, that I want to engage with. So I cast around to see who amongst men has risen to be a voice, a hero in this difficult terrain. And I come across this guy called Andrew Tate. Right? Sounds like some people have come across him before. A former professional kickboxer. Tate is your archetypal alpha male. His videos are about how to make money off crypto, how to pick up women, and general screeds about being a powerful man. Before being kicked off social media, he had over 4.5 million Instagram followers, 600,000 subscribers to Tate Speech, and videos carrying his hashtag on TikTok have been viewed over 14 billion times. Young men are flocking to this guy. In an interview, he said, "You can't slander me because I will state right now that I'm absolutely sexist, I'm absolutely a misogynist, and I have fuck you money, and you can't take that away from me." He's currently under arrest on sex trafficking charges. Okay, let's move on. I come across Dr. Jordan Peterson, psychologist, author, your archetypal academic intellectual daddy. Maybe now we're moving in the right direction. I read his New York Times best-selling book, 12 Rules for Life. To me, it's actually a great rallying cry, reminiscent of Stoic philosophy, which is quite similar to Buddhism in many ways. And I think this is probably great for young men to read this book. Some of the rules are: stand up straight with your shoulders back. Treat yourself like someone you are responsible for helping. Pursue what is meaningful, not what is expedient. And tell the truth, or at least don't lie. Okay, so he's introducing a code to live by, based on self-respect and finding meaning. So I go and look up some of his videos on the internet. What happened? The man in the book is not the man in these videos. He's delighting in baiting feminists. He's become a mouthpiece for individualistic, ego-driven male dominance. He's a reactionary, he's nasty, and he's got 500 million views on YouTube. Now, I have my own theory that I suspect the editor of his book has a strong hand in making it different from the person that he is. I also think maybe he started out as a champion of Western Enlightenment, but he found his tribe through the polarisation that the world seems to be stuck in right now, where the dominant voices find their audiences and their paychecks through social media algorithms. If anything, this exercise, and through talking to other blokes, has shown me that we have a real problem to work with here. And I have heard quite a few times that blokes are too scared to talk about it and don't want to front up about it. I think perhaps even just the numbers in the room today might be illustrative of that. There's lots of blokes that liked the idea of coming today, but only a few that came. Okay, how are we going to work with this? Let's kind of paint an over-the-top picture, right? Let's start with the feeling of being unfairly attacked. If this patriarchy is the pinnacle of privilege, why does it feel like shit? Why is the male suicide rate 3 to 4 times higher? Why do we die 10 years earlier? Why are we so lonely? Why are there hardly any support services for blokes? No one cares about men. And we speak up, we get shouted down. I'm feeling an attack of the worldly winds. In the Lokavipati Sutta, the Buddha's teachings on the 8 worldly winds is a set of 4 opposing states which exist in our lives. Pleasure and pain, gain and loss, praise and blame, and fame and disrepute. These winds can knock us off our path, obscure our view, and make us reactionary. What I want to zoom in on is particularly how to be with the blame that is levelled at men. Please allow me to propose a method for processing this. It's kind of like a signal path diagram for how to be with feeling blamed. I receive a communication expressing disdain that white men are destroying the world through patriarchal capitalism and get out of the way. I feel outrage that this is pointed at me, despite all the good I feel like I'm doing in the world. Observe that outrage. I track it back into my body and feel where that lives in a contraction of my muscles. I acknowledge that feeling in my body as a blend of anger and fear. I acknowledge I feel that way because I've processed this situation as feeling attacked. I acknowledge that the reaction to the feeling of being attacked belongs to me. I uncouple that feeling from the situation. I turn my attention to the expressor. I hear what they are saying. I acknowledge that the blame they are directing comes from a feeling of outrage. I acknowledge that the feeling of outrage comes from a feeling of anger and fear. I acknowledge that this person is having an experience in their body. There is anger. There is fear. Jack Cornfield, in After the Ecstasy, the Laundry, writes, quote, "Whatever hardens and closes our hearts leaves us rigid, frightened, unresponsive. Through our grudges and fears, we become increasingly territorial and defensive. How can we keep the heart open without losing our strength and our sense of justice? To do this, we must allow the heart to become strong in a new way. We turn towards the suffering of the world willingly and let it stretch our compassion. In the inevitable pains, conflicts, and betrayal, we discover we can embrace the power of love. In the midst of difficulty, we can repeatedly stop and return to our heart, reconnect to our strength of compassion and vulnerability." End quote. As men, we are so frequently and generously being invited into the realm of experience of women and non-binary people. The cries for allyship and understanding are all around us. When our reactions are in the right place, we have the opportunity to develop karuna, one of the Brahma Viharas or sublime attitudes. Karuna refers to the deep empathy and compassion one feels towards the suffering of others, coupled with the wish to alleviate that suffering. And I feel like cultivating karuna gives us a superpower to be able to zoom out of our perspective. Whether you can get with reincarnation or not, we need to mature beyond viewing ourselves as 100-year-old beings and start thinking of ourselves as 100,000-year-old beings. In that time frame, we can observe the tiny sliver of lifetime we've been granted to work with. And for blokes, if that sliver is to live in a safe country in relative wealth and comfort, and to find out that our voices are not valued quite as highly, it's actually a wonderful gift to be dealt with. We've been given permission to let go. Our society is not ready to listen to male distress. Male fragility is real, but now is not the time to fight for the microphone. Everyone's tired of men fighting. If we stay zoomed out of our immediate experience, we can observe that our gender identity is just another fetter that binds us. It's an arbitrary hand of cards we've been dealt to work with. We can't completely ignore it. We still have our hormones, we have our enculturation, but we have the capacity to relax our grip. When we notice other people beyond the outward expression of their gendered traits, we free ourselves to relate as less encumbered beings in each other's presence. Perhaps the final gift men have to receive from the benefits of patriarchy is freedom from the bonds of gendered identity. In this zoomed out place, I can observe my starting problem. What should I do in a situation where men are being discriminated against? Zooming out allows me to observe the nature of change. Since time immemorial, men have had every opportunity in the arts. Specialisation has most often been the privilege of men, And that's been off the back of the labour of women. Now the tides are changing and arriving in various ways. New isms, new language, and I'm aware that I'm skipping over generations of movements, theories, perspectives here. I've only got 20 minutes. But it does seem to me like the currently valued approach of intersectionalism and equity are not new. They are the re-languaging of old problems. They should not be about redressing old imbalances with new ones. But in the zoomed out place, I can observe the nature of change. And this means that there's no such thing as a perfect course correction. We are steering a ship that's the size of the world. And if in my current experience I find myself in a ripple of inequity, by observing my 100,000 years, I can take the perspective of hope in change and observe the beauty of the life that we are all navigating together. Then all that's left for me is to take 100-year me and 100,000 me and bring them together and nurture myself to become the essence of change. And in that place, I feel like I can behave in the most skillful way. Now, I kind of didn't know how to end this talk. I was thinking about, gaming out what my actual options are, but I don't think that's the point. It's not what we're here for. The point is how we arrive at a place of equanimity with an issue that we're dealing with, that I'm dealing with. I was also going to go on a bit of a tear talking about what actual good male role models we have instead of our Andrew Tates and our Jordan Petersons, and thinking about, maybe Bob Brown. I'm thinking about Vladimir Zelensky, maybe a little bit. There's still some war there. But then I realised that I am also in a room of people who are good examples. Got one here. This is Gina Bashro. He has made a promise for the rest of his life to help every living thing. We have Adrian, whose job is to help people with disability day to day. He kept helping the same guy even though he was assaulted by him. We've got Shannon, who gave up his whole career and retrained and now helps people out of the mud with narcotics addiction. I've got enormous respect for the guys that come into this room, and I take a lot of heart from the examples that you give. I don't have set questions for small groups. I figured maybe we could just chat, talk it out. Thanks everyone online. Appreciate you coming, and everyone for coming today.